Hi everyone, back in the van today, and I've had a load of questions asking about how I power everything in the van and about this Bluetti EB55. So in this video I'm going to talk you through exactly why I've chosen this and how I'm using it in the van. Okay, so I've chosen this Bluetti EB55 because of three major considerations really. Size, power and cost. So let's talk about the size of it first. It's fairly small considering what it does. So it's 11 inches by 8 inches by 8 inches, and it was designed, or I've designed the van to fit it into this cubby hole here. So this cubby hole is all my electrics. They're on the back wall behind here. I'll show you that in a minute. And the Bluetti sits in just in here, and I've got a little shelf in front for putting my phone or whatever I want to charge up with the Bluetti. So that's the size consideration. And the power rating, well, the battery, the lithium polymer battery is rated at 537 watt hours. So that's actually quite decent in comparison to its competition. They're all much of a muchness, but this is just slightly more. But the good thing is that this is rated to, I think it's 1,500 charges or something like that, which is significantly more than some of the other options on offer. The other thing is it does a power rating of I think it's 700 watts. So I've never really used it for that. So the AC side of it, the two plugs here, they're rated up to 700 watts. You're never going to get that with a DC. So you're never really going to be pushing it. Well, I'm not in this van. I mean, you might be pushing it a little bit if you were using something like a travel kettle or something like that. But I'm using gas for boiling water, so it's not really a consideration for me. So the AC side, I might use battery chargers or something like that, but for my camera. But power consideration, it's not really an issue. The main number for me is 537 watt hours. So what does that mean? Well, for example, I've got an iPhone 15 Pro, so I can charge that. That's got a 12.7 watt hour battery apparently, so I can charge that on paper at least 42 times. An iPad Air, for example, you could charge 16.5 times. The Canon batteries that I use in my Canon cameras is the LP-E6 NH battery. They're 15.3 watt hours, so I could in theory charge those up to 35 times with this. And I've got an electric cool box fridge which runs on the 12 volt car socket. If I was to plug it in on this, I could run that for around about 10 hours in theory. All of those numbers are on paper. That obviously depends on optimal battery condition in the Bluetti, the right operating temperatures and things like that. So realistically, you're probably looking at something more like 80 to 90% of that, I would think, and less as the batteries age. But they are guaranteed for 2 years and 1,500 cycles, I think it is, which after that would probably go down to about 80% of capacity anyway. So that's the Bluetti. Sockets on the front. You've got 4 USB-A's, 1 USB-C, which will go up to 100 watts. And then for the UK model, I've got 2 3-pin plugs, and that's running on the sine wave inverter, and they will go up to 700 watts. On the top right corner, now this is the one that I'm going to pay particular attention to for this video. I've got a 12 volt car socket, cigarette style lighter socket there, and to the left of that I've got 2 DC 5521 ports. Now they're important for my van because they're the sockets that I use to power the van lights. And then on the top left side there are two chargers. So you've got a round connector and a another kind of DC input. I think it's an MPPT socket. I'm not sure on that, but that's basically a solar panel connector. But we'll come to that very shortly. So the power brick, which is currently at home, I plug the Bluetti into that to give it a full charge. And if I was to do that, that charges at 200 watts, and it will take me 3 hours to charge this from empty to full in 3 hours. Also, the other socket that comes with it, you can charge that at the same time alongside the power brick. So that means that you're charging at 400 watts, which means you could charge it in possibly just less than 2 hours, which is quite respectable. If you're using just a 12-volt car charger, which is this cable, so this cable came with it. So that's the MPPT plug, and the socket is here, and the 12-volt car connector. If I was to charge it with that, it would take just over 6 hours, and you're limited to 10 amps with a cigarette lighter socket. So that's why it takes a lot longer. But it's quite useful to plug into the car when I'm driving along, just to keep the Bluetti charged up. And in fact, what I've done is in this van, I've only got one cigarette lighter, one DC power socket, and that's right at the front between the passenger seats underneath the gear stick. So when I was actually building this van, I actually installed an extension cable that goes from that socket, which you can plug in, unplug as I need to, if I want to use it for any other things. But I can plug it into there, and the other end of the extension is in this cubby hole, and I fixed it up there so that what I could do when I'm driving along, I can plug that in to the extension, plug that into the Bluetti, and the car will be topping it up as I drive along, just to make sure that when I stop for the night, I'm fully charged and ready to go. So that's the Bluetti. But how do I use this to power the all the services in the van, all the lights? So what I mentioned earlier is these two DC 5521 ports. So in the van, what I've installed to the electrical system, so the electrical system is completely independent of the car electrical system, the actual, the van electrics. So this is all self-contained, running from the Bluetti. So from those DC ports, I've got these two DC 5521 jack plugs. So these are the two DC 5521 jack plugs, and they're split into obviously red and black wires. So that's positive and ground. Positive wire then goes off to these positive bus bars. So one bus bar and one fuse box for each of those cables. From the bus bar, that then splits into a stack of fuses. So I've got two fuse boxes there, and each fuse is for each of those services. So that means that each service, each light is completely protected by its own fuse. So that protects all of the other lights and things like that, and the Bluetti itself, although it does have its own protection from any issues that may arise. But it's all low powered stuff, so it's not really an issue, to be honest with you. But that's the way I've wired it up. Each service has its own fuse, and then the wire from there goes off to a light switch, and then off to the actual bulb or light itself, and then the return comes back to a black side bus bar, which then comes back into the other side of the DC 5521. Now, while we're on the subject, that extension lead that I was talking about earlier is just here, so I can plug that into there, and I can charge the Bluetti up using the other end here, which I believe is an MPPT plug, which is the same as the solar panel connections. Just as an aside, the main fuse box I've got here, that is for the external power hookup. So I've got an external hookup outside, just underneath the back of the van. That then comes into this fuse box or consumer unit, and it goes off to this 3-pin mains plug here. And speaking of light switches, these are the switches that I have installed for the individual lights around the van. So to install the Bluetti into my van, all I do is move the cables out of the way, slide this in. It sits in its own little kind of blocks to stop it moving around when I'm driving, so it's pretty sturdy and rigid. It's not going to go anywhere. And then this connector I plug into the top left, so that will keep the battery, the Bluetti battery, topped up as I'm driving around. And then these two DC ports plugs, I plug into the DC ports, and that gives me power to all the lights. So now I have the ceiling lights, the reading lights, the two overhead door lights. I've got the rear back floodlights, which are on a switch over at the back here, so you can see those there, and the cupboard light down here. Okay, so as I mentioned, I've got an electric cool box fridge, which I actually keep on my front seat, my front passenger seat, folded down. So that's over there at the moment. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to plug this into the Bluetti. The fan's come on, it's starting up. So it's showing 56 watts at the moment. It's just coming down just a couple, but for argument's sake, let's say 50 watts. So 537 watt hours. I can run this for about 10.5 hours, assuming optimal conditions. So there you go. That's how I power the van with the EB55. Hope you found that useful. Don't forget, if you like this video, give me a thumbs up, give us a like, and also consider subscribing for any photography van life videos in the future. Thanks for watching. See you again soon. Bye for now.